Welcome to Keep What You Earn, a show for entrepreneurs and business owners who want to scale and build enterprise value without making costly mistakes. I'm your host, Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CFO and CPA who left a career serving Fortune 50 companies in Wall Street to help business owners just like you make life-changing wealth with your business. These episodes are meant to be super tactical and actionable, but please remember, consult your own financial professional before you implement anything you learn in this podcast. Now, if you'd be interested in working with us to do so, check out the show notes for more information about our company, Keep What You Earn Co. All right, let's start the show. All right, welcome back to Keep What You Earn. Today, we're going to be expanding on the Profitable Scaling Playbook. I'm talking about this all month, and we just finished up Core Offer Profit, which is phase 1 of the playbook, and we're moving on to phase 2 today, and that is operating profit. This is probably the metric that you're most used to measuring. So this might be a little bit of a shorter episode because you're probably familiar with this, but I want you familiar with the order of these focuses because a lot of people focus on this as sort of the key beacon, the key metric, and it's so much more complicated, unfortunately, than this, but there's so much more to explore in your finances than just your P&L, than just your operating profit. So we're going to go through where this fits into your financial strategy so that way you're not over-indexing this number and you know how to use it effectively. So the core offer profit, by the way, that we already discussed, just as a reminder, is fundamentally, are you selling something for more than you bought it for? Okay. Operating profit, we're going to talk about today, is do you have any money left over after paying the cost to run the business? Are you essentially making more money than you are spending to run your business? That's what operating profit is. So this is also called the net profit. This is also where you find it on the P&L. It's the bottom number on your P&L. A lot of people call this your EBITDA or EBIT, things like that. You know, there's a ton of different names for this. Net margin. I like operating profit because fundamentally, this is the byproduct of your operations of your business. We're going to get into cash flow next, which is a little bit more expansive than operating. But this being your operating profit, this is a really key focus that you should be working on in your business all the time. And I didn't mention this in the prior episodes, but core offer profit is something you should be examining really every time you revisit pricing or every time your costs change, because it should be pretty stagnant. Like once you've established that you have core offer profitability, you're kind of good until things change, until any of the variables that go into it change, in which case you should revisit. Operating profit is super fluid because you could be profitable one month and not the next because overhead is a little bit less predictable than your core offer profit. So you got to pay more attention to this. I would be looking at this on a monthly basis. I'd be running my P&L, and I'm going to go through kind of my framework of how to look at your operating profit and how to triage and fix the different issues with your operating profit. So you know you have an operating profit issue if you make enough core offer profit but you're spending more on operating costs than the business can handle. What I also call this is you're eating more than you're killing. So you're too hungry to hunt. You're eating too much and you're not creating new food, basically. Now, we tend to look at operating profit a certain way where as long as profit is positive, that's good, okay? That's not always the case. Just like we talked about with core offer profit, you want to understand industry standard. You want to understand what is typical. You also want to work backwards from your margin. We call this your net margin. You want to work backward from that operating profit number. And I would definitely be looking at this as a percentage of sales. Okay, your operating profit should be expressed as a percentage of sales because when you look at it as just a number, you know, it's helpful, but as you sell more, this could skew you a little bit. So I'll give you an example. If you are a $1 million business and you're making a $200,000 profit, objectively, that's like pretty good. It's a 20% margin. But if you're measuring like 200,000 is good, and then you 10x your sales and you go to a $10 million business, you're like, that's a 2% margin. That may not be good. So we want to be thinking about it as a percentage of your sales, number one. That's the most indicative of what you're keeping from what you're earning. Since you're at this show, that's what we're trying to do. Hey, Shannon here, and I have a quick favor to ask.
If you're enjoying this podcast and enjoying this episode, please leave us a review on your podcast platform, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, any of them, and let us know if you're enjoying the show. One of your biggest takeaways, we would really, really appreciate it. Okay, back to the show.
Here's how you want to be looking at operating profit. You want to be looking at what happens between the core offer profit and operating profit. That is your operating expenses. That is your overhead. That is the cost to run your business. That's a lot of your payroll, a lot of indirect expenses. So you want to study this and you want to be working backward from your desired profit. And you should be using some type of gulp budget, hear me out, to balance out what is healthy, what is a good idea for your business. You may have heard me talk about this before, but I like to look at budgeting kind of like nutrition and kind of like a diet. Now, a lot of people associate budgeting and dieting in a negative way. I actually look at it kind of like I looked at Weight Watchers back in the day. They would give you these points you had to use, and as long as you stayed within your range, you would get the results that you wanted. That's the fundamental concept of budgeting. However, I also love the idea of budgeting because, and I say it's more profit planning. If you want to use a different term, I use profit planning because what we're doing is carving out these different expenses that you spend money on, giving them different labels and saying, okay, my target healthy zone, just like food, like carbs, fats, and proteins, we have healthy zones for acquisition costs, operating costs, and fulfillment costs, which fulfillment costs really go into your core offer profit. And then the other two are part of your operating profit, which is your acquisition costs and your operating costs. And acquisition costs are really marketing, the cost to acquire new clients. This also involves maybe it's travel, maybe it's going to conferences, maybe it's actual ad spend on social media. Maybe it is simply, email marketing platforms and software. So all of those are acquisition costs in my mind. And keep what you earn land. We call these acquisition costs. Operating costs are things like your VA, your operations person, your other softwares that you use to run your business, maybe your IT team, maybe your contractors that you may use in your business to do various projects for you, uniforms, your rent, utilities, things like that. Those are all part of overhead. Those are all part of operating costs. And by all means, if you have a particular category of expenses that you think is really helpful to separate out because you spend so much money on it, like let's say vehicle costs, if you run like a vehicle maintenance company, by all means, you should probably be looking at that. If you have a very specific type of business, more niche, where you have a heavy concentration of certain types of expenses, absolutely consider that. But when we look at these budgets, we want to be thinking about, okay, what is a healthy range? And you want to establish that working backwards from your profit. So you got to be looking at, hey, if you want to have a 15% margin or a 20% margin at the bottom, then let's talk about what's our core offer profit percent, our margin up there. Cool. Then we figure out how much we have left over. You're basically just slicing up the pie to say how much is going to be dedicated to operating costs and how much is going to be dedicated to acquisition. And then by doing that, you're figuring out your formula for a profitable business. That if all of these things are true, then it would be unreasonable not to be profitable, right? So when you can create a sort of structure like this for your business, where this is our map to profitability. If we stay within these healthy zones, we're profitable. The maths. So this is really where you want to be spending some time and attention in just figuring out, well, let's just make a couple of key decisions here. Let's group our expenses into these 3 or 4 categories. And let's split our sales up into how much is going to fulfillment, how much is going to acquisition, how much is going to operations, and then how much is left over for profit. And understand this, if you're going to be overspending in a particular area, then you either need to be taking that from another category or inherently it's coming from profit. And unfortunately, a lot of business owners out there are eating away at their own profits because they're not balancing these different categories. They're not rebalancing, recalibrating. They're just overspending in multiple categories, and the only one left to eat at is profit. So just keep that in mind as you're going through looking at your P&L. This is where I'd recommend after this episode, you pull your profit and loss statement, you ask your bookkeeper for it, you ask your accountant for it, and you go through and potentially even organize your expenses on your profit and loss. You can do this in QuickBooks. We do it for our clients. Organize it by these categories, and then do a report that shows the percentage of sales. and be monitoring that every single month to see if you're in your healthy zones. This is a great way to manage your expenses without going line by line and getting stuck by the decimal point, by looking at these $100 expenses here and there and wasting your time. This will tell you outright what area you should probably be focusing on and have more discipline. So we're going to dig into this a little bit more in the next episode in terms of what you can do when you realize that you're overspending, ways to troubleshoot this, and ways to measure your operating profits so that it's effective and that you can then move on to managing cash flow and growing your business.
As you think about growing and scaling your business, it's important to focus on how your operating costs align with your profit and personal goals. Are you allocating your resources wisely? Are your expenses supporting growth, or are they holding you back? Building a sustainable and profitable business takes intentional budgeting and regular assessments of where your money's actually going. Now, with a power session, you can get personalized strategies to help your businesses thrive. Check out the show notes for more information on power sessions and how we can work with you to create the profit plan your business needs for a successful 2025.